The courtroom was silent, so silent that you could almost hear the tension breathing. The cameras rolled, but even they seemed hesitant to capture what was about to unfold. Then, Judge Judy's voice sliced through the silence like a lightning bolt. Her tone was calm, but the words landed with the force of a gavel slamming down on truth itself. "You tried to destroy a child's future to protect your own reputation," she said, her gaze locked on the man standing before her. "And you thought I wouldn't find out?" The man, Edward Langford, a respected school principal for nearly 20 years, stood frozen. His lips parted slightly, as though forming an excuse that never arrived. The arrogance that had carried him through countless parent meetings, board discussions, and media appearances had vanished. In its place was something new, fear. Not the kind that fades when the lights go off, but the kind that settles deep in the bones when you realize your own lies have trapped you. Across the courtroom sat a teenage girl named Emily Torres. Her eyes were red from tears, but not the kind born from guilt or shame. These were the quiet tears of someone who had finally been believed. Beside her sat her mother, Maria, holding her hand like she had through every sleepless night since the accusation. This wasn't just a school dispute. It wasn't about graffiti or vandalism or broken rules. It was about how power can turn a man into a monster, and how one judge refused to let that power crush a child. The audience didn't know it yet, but this was the moment the entire case turned upside down. The story that began with a ruined reputation and a ruined transcript was about to become national news. Judge Judy had already seen something no one else had caught. A missing file. A doctored statement. And one simple question that would expose everything. As Langford stood there, the courtroom lights seemed to grow hotter. You could almost see the sweat forming at his temples. Every breath he took felt heavier, every glance toward Judge Judy was a silent plea that went unanswered. Emily didn't look at him. She didn't need to. She had already spent months looking at headlines calling her a delinquent, a troublemaker, a stain on the school's perfect image. Now, the nation's most famous judge was looking right into the face of the man who caused it all. "This case," Judy began, her tone measured and deliberate, "isn't about school policy or discipline. It's about truth, and what happens when the people trusted to teach it forget it themselves." The principal swallowed hard. Behind his forced composure, there was panic. He had walked into this courtroom certain that his charm and reputation would carry him through, that Judge Judy would see him as the victim of teenage rebellion. But what he didn't know was that Judy had already spoken to the district's IT department. She had already seen the original footage from the school's security cameras. And there, buried in those files, was something Edward Langford had hoped would stay hidden forever. For months, he'd blamed Emily Torres for defacing the school wall with spray-painted words that read, "No justice." The school board believed him. The parents believed him. Even local media had aired the story, calling it a sad reflection of youth entitlement. Emily was suspended, humiliated, and nearly expelled. But what nobody realized, not until now, was that she was innocent. And the man accusing her wasn't just wrong, he was guilty. The audience sat on the edge of their seats. You could feel it through the screen, the mix of outrage and anticipation. Every eye was on Judge Judy as she slowly flipped through the case file, her expression unreadable. She looked up at Langford once more, and her voice dropped into a tone that made the entire courtroom hold its breath. "Mr. Langford," she said, "you've been a principal for how many years?" 20, he answered quietly. "And you thought you could outsmart me in one afternoon?" He blinked, speechless. The tension broke into murmurs from the audience. Somewhere in the back row, a microphone picked up a whisper, "He's done." Judge Judy leaned back in her chair. Her hands folded neatly on the bench, the picture of calm authority. But her eyes, sharp, relentless, never left his. "This courtroom," she said, "isn't a place for politics. It's a place for truth. And if you think your title will protect you from that truth, she paused, her voice tightening, you're about to find out otherwise. The narrator's voice fades in softly over the hush that followed. This case wasn't just about school politics, it was about a powerful man who framed a student, and the single piece of evidence that turned the entire courtroom upside down. What Judge Judy revealed next would end a 20-year career, in one sentence. Before we dive into this jaw-dropping case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because what Judge Judy did next deserves to be seen everywhere in America. And trust me, you'll want to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next. Before the cameras ever rolled in Judge Judy's courtroom, this story had already broken a family apart. Emily Torres was just 16, soft-spoken, brilliant, and known in her community for winning spelling bees and volunteering at the library after school. Her teachers described her as respectful and driven, the kind of student parents held up as an example. But all of that vanished the morning a janitor found 3 words sprayed across the back wall of Lincoln High in bright red paint, "No justice here." By noon, the story had already spread. Students whispered. Teachers speculated. And Principal Edward Langford, known for his zero-tolerance policies, called Emily into his office before she could even process what was happening. He didn't ask questions. He didn't request evidence. He simply told her she was suspended, effective immediately. Emily tried to explain. "Sir, I didn't do this," she said, voice trembling. "I was at debate practice." "You can ask." But he cut her off. "I've already reviewed the footage," he said sharply. "Actions have consequences, Miss Torres." That one line, "actions have consequences," would haunt Emily for months. By the next morning, the local news had picked up the story. The headline read, "Student defaces school property in protest." Her photo, yearbook smile, innocent eyes, sat right beside a picture of the vandalized wall. Reporters stood outside the school gates talking about teenage anger and youth rebellion. They didn't know they were destroying a reputation that had taken 16 years to build. At home, Emily locked herself in her room and cried for hours. Her mother, Maria, stood helpless outside the door, listening to her daughter repeat the same words again and again, "I didn't do it. Why won't anyone believe me?" Maria tried calling the school, but Langford refused to take her calls. In one brief email, he wrote, "Your daughter admitted guilt by omission. The decision stands." It wasn't just arrogance, it was cruelty dressed as authority. Weeks passed. Emily's friends drifted away. The parents of other students whispered in grocery aisles. One teacher even told Maria privately, "I don't think she did it. But the principal doesn't want bad press before the school board meeting." That's when Maria decided she wouldn't stay silent anymore. She took the suspension letter, the photos, and the local news coverage, and she filed a lawsuit. Not because she wanted revenge, but because she wanted her daughter's name cleared. The case landed on Judge Judy's desk, a place where arrogance goes to die and truth gets its chance to breathe. When the court date was announced, news outlets scrambled to cover it. A teenage girl versus a 20-year principal, it was the kind of story that split public opinion right down the middle. But what no one expected was that this quiet, humble mother and daughter were about to expose something much darker than a false accusation. And as the narrator's voice lowers, it hits like a quiet punch to the gut. Because sometimes, the people we trust to teach integrity are the ones who need it the most. If you've ever seen someone in power crush an innocent person just to look good, smash that like button, because what Judge Judy uncovers here will make you believe in real justice again. When the cameras began rolling, Principal Edward Langford carried himself with the same confidence that had once commanded an entire school. He adjusted his tie, smiled faintly at the audience, and stood tall, as if he were there to teach, not to be judged. But Judge Judy had seen that posture before. It was the stance of a man who believed his position could protect him from accountability. She leaned forward slightly, peering over the rim of her glasses. $15,000 in damages for graffiti, she said, her tone dry as sandpaper. You must have iron walls at your school, Mr. Langford. A ripple of laughter spread through the courtroom audience, but Langford didn't flinch. Instead, he offered a small, smug smile. Rules are rules, Your Honor, he said smoothly. This student violated the code of conduct and defaced school property. The amount covers cleaning, repainting, and the replacement of security systems damaged during the incident. Security systems? Judy raised an eyebrow. She damaged cameras too. He hesitated for just a second, 1 second too long. Not directly. But the maintenance costs were affected by the investigation. That pause was all Judy needed. Emily sat beside her mother, hands clasped tightly together. Her voice was barely a whisper when she said, "I didn't do it." Judy glanced at her, and for a moment, her expression softened. Then her eyes turned back to Langford, cold and sharp again. The narration lowered into a tense rhythm. What the principal didn't know was that Judge Judy had already reviewed the original security footage, and something about it didn't add up. Judy flipped through the case file, each page making a crisp sound that echoed through the quiet courtroom. "Tell me, Mr. Langford," she said, her voice deceptively polite. "Who reviewed this footage?" "I did," he said quickly. "Who downloaded it?" "Our IT administrator." "And who labeled the evidence file submitted to this court?" There was another pause. Langford's eyes darted toward his briefcase. "That would have been handled by my assistant," he said. "Your assistant?" Judy repeated, jotting something down. "Does this assistant also determine which 3 minutes of footage mysteriously go missing before the incident?" The color drained from his face. I don't know what you're referring to." "Oh, I think you do." The air in the courtroom changed. You could feel the audience shift forward, everyone realizing they were watching the moment when a man's certainty began to crack. Judy's pen tapped lightly against her notepad, her faint smile growing like a storm cloud gathering over his head. "Let me ask you one more thing," she said. "Did you personally verify that the student in the video was Miss Torres?" "Yes, absolutely." Judy nodded slowly, pretending to accept it. "Good," she said, almost too calmly. "Then I'm sure you won't mind if we take a closer look together." Langford tried to hold his composure, but a bead of sweat rolled down his temple. He could feel the trap tightening, one question at a time, one polite smile at a time. Judge Judy wasn't raising her voice. She didn't need to. The truth was already starting to unravel on its own. Judge Judy adjusted her glasses and leaned back slightly, the silence so thick you could almost hear the tension in the air. Then, with the calm authority that only she could command, she said, "Let's talk about the footage." The words hit the room like a spark to gasoline. "Mr. Langford, you brought Exhibit A," she continued, holding up a small USB drive between her fingers. "But I have Exhibit B, the original file retrieved from your school's server." For the first time, the principal's confident smile faltered. His eyes blinked rapidly as if trying to process what she had just said. "Exhibit B," he repeated, his voice barely steady. "That's right," Judy replied, her tone smooth but lethal. "And before you start explaining how that's not possible, I suggest you watch it." The courtroom gasped as the clerk dimmed the lights and turned on the screen. The video flickered to life, grainy black and white security footage of the school hallway. At first, everything looked normal. Students passing by. The empty wall at the far end of the corridor. And then, static. The footage skipped forward 3 minutes, just as Judge Judy had hinted. When the picture returned, the wall was already covered in bright red graffiti. No justice here. Judy pressed pause. 3 minutes, she said quietly. 3 minutes missing from the school's official file. 3 minutes erased from the only evidence you used to destroy this girl's life. Langford swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing visibly. That must be a glitch in the system, Your Honor, he stammered. Our recording software. Save it, Judy interrupted. Her voice didn't rise, it didn't need to. Glitches don't lie, Mr. Langford. People do. The audience murmured in agreement, the hum of outrage spreading like electricity. Judy turned back to the monitor. Now, she said, pressing play again, let's see what really happened in those missing 3 minutes. The screen lit up once more, this time showing a young man entering the hallway from the left side, tall, wearing a hoodie, his movements quick but deliberate. He looked around, then pulled out a can of spray paint. The courtroom collectively held its breath. It wasn't Emily Torres. When he turned toward the camera, the light hit his face, clear enough for everyone to see. Judge Judy froze the frame. This, she said softly, is the assistant principal's son. Gasps filled the room. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh my God." Judy's eyes moved back to Langford, whose face had gone ghost white. The color drained from his cheeks as he fumbled for words, but none came. His fingers gripped the edge of the table like a man trying not to drown. The narrator's voice returned, low and steady, almost reverent. The room went dead quiet. The truth was finally visible, and it wasn't painted by Emily Torres. Judge Judy's stare didn't waver. 3 minutes, she said again, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. That's all it took to ruin a girl's life. But now, those same 3 minutes might ruin yours. The camera lingered on Langford's expression, guilt, disbelief, and the slow collapse of a man realizing that the lie he built his reputation on had just collapsed in front of millions. And Judge Judy hadn't even delivered her verdict yet. The tension in the courtroom was like a live wire, humming, dangerous, moments away from sparking into flames. Judge Judy sat completely still, her gaze locked on the trembling principal across the room. Every second of silence made him smaller, weaker, more exposed. Then, with a calm so precise it felt surgical, she said, "Mr. Langford, did you personally verify this footage before suspending Miss Torres?" There was no hesitation. He lifted his chin slightly and answered, "Yes, absolutely." It was over. Judy's lips curved into that half-smile her audience had learned to fear, the kind that wasn't amusement, but confirmation. The courtroom leaned forward, sensing something seismic about to happen. "Then," she said, her voice slicing through the air, "you just admitted to tampering with evidence." For a moment, time stopped. The words hung there, heavy, final. You could see the realization crawl across Langford's face, first confusion, then shock, then dread. His hands twitched on the table as if he wanted to grab something to steady himself, but there was nothing left to hold on to. The audience gasped audibly, and somewhere in the second row, someone whispered, "Oh my God." Judge Judy didn't flinch. She reached into her file stack, pulled out a folder sealed with a court stamp, and laid it flat on the bench. "We subpoenaed your IT logs," she said calmly, almost too calmly. "And they show that you accessed the school's security server at 11:42 p.m. the night before this case. That's when the footage was modified. You didn't protect your school, sir, you protected your lie." The eruption was immediate. Murmurs, shocked gasps, and the sound of hands slapping over mouths filled the air. Even the cameraman, usually motionless, turned slightly to catch Langford's expression, a man cornered by his own arrogance. "If this moment doesn't make you believe in karma," the narrator's voice rose over the chaos, "hit that like button right now, because Judge Judy's next line. It belongs in history books." Judy leaned forward, elbows on the bench, eyes burning with controlled fury. "You didn't just fail a student," she said. "You tried to destroy her. You weaponized authority, falsified evidence, and mocked the justice system by walking into this courtroom thinking you were untouchable." Langford opened his mouth to respond, but his voice cracked before the words could form. "Your Honor. I didn't." "Stop." Her interruption was sharp, immediate. "Do not insult this courtroom with another lie." He froze, the weight of her words crushing any remaining defiance. The smug posture was gone. The principal who once barked orders at teachers now looked like a man stripped of every illusion of power. His shoulders slumped. His face reddened. His eyes glossed with humiliation. "I built that school," he whispered hoarsely, as if clinging to the last piece of pride he had left. Judy's reply was instant, cold, devastating. "No, Mr. Langford. You built a reputation. And now you've just watched it burn to the ground, on national television." The courtroom fell silent again, the kind of silence that feels holy, the sound of justice being served. Emily's mother reached for her daughter's hand, and for the first time in months, Emily smiled. The man who had once called her a disgrace was now the one being dismissed. The courtroom sat in a suspended hush, the kind that only comes when everyone knows the hammer is about to drop. Judge Judy's pen tapped once against the bench, sharp as a heartbeat. Then she spoke, her voice clear, firm, and final. "This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Miss Emily Torres." Emily's eyes widened, her lips parting in disbelief. For a second, she didn't breathe. Months of humiliation, nights spent crying, days spent wondering if anyone would ever believe her, it all shattered in that single moment. Judge Judy wasn't finished. "Mr. Langford," she said, turning toward the man who once strutted through hallways like he owned them, "you are ordered to pay $50,000 in restitution, personally. Not from the school budget. From your pocket." A collective gasp swept through the room. Langford's mouth opened, but no words came out. His lawyer placed a hand on his shoulder, a silent acknowledgement that it was over. Judy continued, her tone tightening. "And this transcript," she said, holding up the thick case file that had just sealed his fate, "will be forwarded to your district's ethics board for review. I suggest you prepare your resignation letter before they prepare your termination." The word struck harder than any gavel could. Langford's head dropped into his hands. The man who once preached discipline and honor now sat defeated, a portrait of hypocrisy laid bare. Across the aisle, Emily turned to her mother. Maria's hand trembled as she reached out, pulling her daughter into an embrace that felt like release, years of faith rewarded in one sweeping moment of justice. Tears spilled freely, but this time, they weren't born from pain. They were the tears of being seen, of being vindicated, of knowing the truth had finally spoken louder than lies. The audience began to applaud, softly at first, then steadily, like a tide rising in rhythm with the beating of a collective heart. Even Judge Judy allowed the faintest smile to tug at her lips. It wasn't pride. It was satisfaction, the kind that comes from restoring balance in a world that too often tilts toward the powerful. Narration filled the silence that followed. The clip hit the internet before the credits rolled. Within hours, parents across the country shared it with one caption, "Finally, a judge who gets it." On social media, hashtags like #JusticeForEmily and #JudgeJudyTruth trended within minutes. Teachers, students, and parents all joined in, calling the verdict a victory for every kid who had ever been silenced by authority. In one viral post, a teacher from Illinois wrote, "This wasn't just about a school. It was about accountability, and courage." Back in the courtroom, as the applause died down, Judy gave one last look at the broken principal. "Let this be a lesson," she said. "Integrity isn't something you teach, it's something you live. And once you lose it, no title can save you." With a single strike of her gavel, the case was over. Emily Torres walked out of that courtroom with her name cleared and her dignity restored. Behind her, Edward Langford sat motionless, staring at the floor, the sound of the gavel still echoing in his mind, marking the end of his career and the beginning of his public downfall. By the next morning, the case was everywhere. News anchors replayed the clip on repeat, that moment when Judge Judy exposed the truth and destroyed a lie that had lived too long. Talk shows called it the most satisfying courtroom takedown of the year. Parents across the country shared the verdict online, captioning it with one powerful sentence: "Finally, someone stood up for the kids." Within hours, hashtags began to flood every corner of the internet: #Justice for Emily, #Judge Judy Truth, #School Corruption. Twitter was a storm of outrage and admiration. On TikTok, teachers stitched the viral clip with messages of support: "Every educator needs to watch this." Parents filmed reaction videos, tears in their eyes, saying, "That could have been my child." And then came the comments from former students of Lincoln High, the very school where it all began. Hundreds of them poured into the comment sections, writing, "He finally got what he deserved." One even said, "He suspended me once for speaking up. I never thought I'd live to see this day." The internet, for once, agreed on something: real justice had been served. In an interview later that week, Maria Torres spoke softly through tears. "I didn't want revenge," she said. "I just wanted people to stop treating my daughter like a criminal. Judge Judy gave us our life back." Emily, standing beside her, smiled shyly at the cameras. "She believed me when no one else did," she said. "That means more than anything." Back in her courtroom, Judge Judy didn't bask in the praise. She didn't need to. For her, it was never about fame, it was about principle. When asked by a reporter how she felt seeing the clip go viral, she simply replied, "It shouldn't take a viral video for people to remember what truth looks like." Narration took over as the story reached its emotional peak. In a world where power often wins, one judge reminded us, truth still has a voice. The viral clip became more than entertainment, it became a symbol. Schools across America began revisiting their disciplinary policies. Superintendents cited the case in leadership seminars. And in one powerful twist of irony, the district that once praised Principal Langford for his firmness now scrubbed his name from every program, every website, every plaque. He had gone from Educator of the Year to Example of Corruption overnight. Meanwhile, Emily Torres returned to school months later, this time, as the student who taught the adults what integrity really meant. Her classmates cheered when she walked through the halls. Teachers hugged her. And when she opened her locker, she found a note taped inside. It said, simply, "Truth won." The narration slowed, almost whispering now, the voice of reflection and closure. Because sometimes, justice doesn't wear a cape. Sometimes, it wears a robe, and reminds us that even in a broken world, right can still triumph over wrong. If this story restored your faith in justice, hit that like button so hard it breaks your screen. Comment "Justice served" if you believe Emily deserved her win. And subscribe right now, because next, we're covering a teacher who tried to frame a student for theft, and Judge Judy's response left everyone speechless. The final sound fades in, the echo of Judy's gavel slamming once, crisp and final. The sound of justice.